welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Free Expression Friday series, an interview series from ABA's American Booksellers for Free Expression, celebrating the amazing work of booksellers, organizers, and book people in general, fighting for the right to read.
I'm joined today by a representative of the advocacy organization Let Utah Read. Peter, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Peter Bromberg, and I am by trade a librarian for 32 years. I've worked in a number of areas in librarianship as a teen librarian, a public librarian, a law librarian, a director. And for the last 3 years, I've been working with EveryLibrary. It's a nonprofit that advocates proactively for libraries and library funding. And I really joined about three and a half years ago to focus on the censorship fight in America, working with grassroots groups to fight censorship, as well as working with coalition partners on the state level to fight terrible legislation.
So how did Let Utah Read come about, and what is its mission?
Great question. It came about as a number of different coalition partners had sort of individually shown up at the state capitol for different committee meetings on some potential book banning bills, the ACLU, PEN America, Utah Library Association, EveryLibrary. And after a hearing on one of those bills that was dispiriting, we were commiserating with each other out in the hallway in the state capitol and said we should get together and do something about this. And Let Utah Read was born right there and then, and really progressed pretty quickly thereafter. And we just let's put all of our assets and our energy together and aligned in a way that we can build some statewide political power to advocate for libraries and against censorship.
So last year, we saw a protracted fight against the passage of HB 29, a historically bad book ban bill that ultimately, unfortunately, did pass. Before we get to the latest news about HB 29, I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about the advocacy against it.
Sure. I mean, it took a number of different forms, along with my colleagues, Paisley Reckdahl, who's with PEN America and was a former poet laureate of Utah, and my colleague, Rebecca Cummings, who's a librarian, but now also running for lieutenant governor in Utah. We co-wrote an op-ed piece calling for common sense solutions and working together. So that was sort of some advocacy to just get that out there in the Salt Lake Tribune and help to build people's awareness about what was happening and frame our perspective on this as let's work together and have common sense approach. Beyond that, through Let Utah Read and with EveryLibrary's support and the digital backbone and some money behind that, we ran petitions to really relatively quickly identify supporters in Utah. And EveryLibrary's been building a national voter file of library supporters for 12 years. So we already had 1,000 people-ish. I don't remember where we were at that point, maybe 1,500 contactable Utahns who have said, I care about this and let me know if we need to do anything. But using petitions and also events like having a read-in at the state capitol and having some authors come out and speak at that, having had a few hundred people, and it was very family-oriented, parents, kids, who we did a silent reading of banned books, and then we had authors speak, etc. And a lot of that was also designed to get press. We got some great press coverage off of that. And so in addition to the petitions, we ran a number of email campaigns along the way. So while the bill was being studied, we had an email campaign to legislators that generated about 2,000 actions to say, hey, please don't pass this bill or modify it to do some harm reduction. When the bill passed, we ran another email campaign a veto campaign to the governor as well. And again, even as those campaigns weren't successful in achieving the killing of the bill or the veto, it still serves as a way to build more awareness and to grow our team, to build our list of people that have self-identified as supporters. So we're better positioned and better prepared for the next round. And I'll also mention that through that all and before the bill, the members of the Utah Library Association, of which I co-chair the advocacy team, we have been meeting with legislators for years. So off session, during session, going to lunch, meeting with them in their office to build the relationships as well as the understanding about how libraries work, what we do and don't do, how books get on the shelf in the first place. And we lost that fight for HB 29, but we will of course continue to have those meetings because in some ways counterintuitively, the more polarized things get, the more important those individual relationships become to try to build a firewall against the whatever's coming next.
Yeah, it's such important work. And, it's a good reminder that who is in those meetings is something that can be controlled in elections, right? So, it's just driving everyone to the polls, especially in battleground states like Utah, is so, so important.
Yeah. Mentioning elections, it's worth noting that there's poll after poll after poll, 10, 12 that I'm aware of, that just show that Americans are strongly opposed to book banning. And this is true on both sides of the aisle. The opposition is a little bit stronger on the left. On the right, there's still a clear majority of people on both sides of the aisle that oppose book banning. And so this is potentially a really good issue to run on and to help to activate voters to come out. That if they have a legislator or a county council member or a school board member that has engaged in censorious activities, that's been banning books, that supports book banning, that's a great way to get people to show up and vote, let them know what's happening.
And so clearly Let Utah Read and so many others were doing incredible work to advocate against HB 29. Unfortunately, as I said, it passed. And in the past few weeks, the thing that we had all, I think, been fearing came to pass. Can you tell us about the 13 books that are now banned statewide in Utah and how and why in the law that was allowed to happen?
Sure. So this law did a number of problematic things. But amongst them, it said that if a book is banned by 3 school districts or by 2 school districts and 5 charter schools, then it has to be banned statewide. And the second thing it did was it made that retroactive. So books have been banned under basically the same sensitive material standard that is in HB 29. That same standard passed under a different name in 2022. So school districts that were so inclined have been banning books. School districts that were not so inclined had guidance from the Attorney General's office that said, well, even though that's the state law, you still probably want to do a whole assessment of the book, apply the Miller test, 3-prong test, taken as a whole. Does it have significant literary, artistic, political, scientific value, et cetera? So many school districts were not banning these books. But nobody was required to report what they were doing. Now, some school districts did report voluntarily, and they posted on their website that these are the books we've banned. And then the Salt Lake Tribune last year did some investigative reporting using public records requests to uncover more information. And so based on those public records requests and the investigative reporting of the Tribune, combined with the public reporting that some school districts were doing, we know that there were about 150 books banned over the last 2 years. And we know that about 50 of those books have been banned by at least 3 school districts. So now coming up through July, this new law of HB 29 says, okay, school districts, you haven't had to tell us what you've been doing. Over the next month, you need to report to the state school board which books you've banned. So the school board can then look at that, identify any book that's been banned 3 times, and issue the order that to all school districts to remove those books. That became the list of 13. Now, again, we know based on public reporting that there's about 50 books that fit into that category. So we can anticipate that there's going to be a second wave to this 13. In fact, the school board put out an FAQ on August 2nd when this initial list was released, and they said schools are still reporting, and we'll put out another list on, and they said in 10 days, which that'll be this Friday. We anticipate another list coming out.
It's really chilling. And, these are only the books that have been banned already, to which that 3 strikes rule is being applied retroactively.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit about if the law is allowed to stand, and of course, with laws as egregious, we've seen legal challenges in the past, so that's a possibility. But if this law is allowed to stand, what do you think could happen in the coming years?
To your first point, yeah, there have been some successful legal challenges around the country, and and hopefully we'll see some activity here in Utah as well. If the law is allowed to stand, what I think what we're going to see is this 13 lists times, pick your factor, times 5, times 10, times 15, because again, we already know that there's 50 books that we know of that have been banned 3 times, but we also know that's an undercount because schools weren't having to report that, and the Tribune, there's over 40 school districts in Utah, and the Tribune was only doing public records requests, I think, to 15 or 17 of them, something like that. So we can have a pretty strong confidence that this is an undercount, and books will continue to be challenged and banned, right? I think that there could be a sense of confidence among those who want to ban books. Okay, now we've got the law clearly on our side. Let's move forward. And these lists already exist. There is a group that's sort of our version of Moms for Liberty here in Utah, called Utah Parents United, that has been compiling the lists or taking the lists off of BookLooks, et cetera, and really working with their members and people across the state to try to file those book challenges. Now, many school districts don't really have limitations on who can file a book challenge or how many book challenges can be filed. So as we've seen in other places, someone can show up and file hundreds of challenges. In Granite School District in Utah, the Tribune uncovered the fact that there were 205 book challenges in the district, and 199 of them came from one married couple. So I think we can anticipate seeing more of that. And as the school districts are now regularly reporting to the school district about their banning, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know if we're going to see 5 books a month, 10 books a month being banned. But whatever the number is, we can anticipate seeing that list of books that are banned statewide grow.
So, if nothing else, people should take away from this that the work that Let Utah Read and so many other advocates in Utah are doing is so essential. How can people get involved and support Let Utah Read?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. So Let Utah Read, of course, is focused on Utah. And if you go to letutahread.org, you'll see we're running an email campaign to our governor and our legislators, and anyone from any state can go ahead and fill that out. You don't have to be from Utah to send that email. In some ways, in fact, like Utah, I think is very conscious of of how it appears to the rest of America and wants to appear as very normal and very American and very as healthy, in terms of how we're governed, et cetera. And so anything that suggests that we are behaving in a way that is extreme, I think legislators and a governor might be sensitive to. So I would encourage anyone in America to go ahead and go to letutahread.org, send those emails. In addition, though, there's 2 things that people can do locally or in their own state. So one is EveryLibrary.org, and that's I work for EveryLibrary. We're working across all 50 states on these issues, and so going to EveryLibrary.org, and just right on the page, on the front page there, you can just click to sign up for our news. So you get into the system, so we can send you updates and action alerts. So if there's a hot spot happening in your state or in your school district, et cetera, we can send very targeted, segmented emails to you if there's something that's going to affect you and your family and your neighborhood and your schools, your public library, et cetera, as well as anything happening on the state level. So I would encourage everyone to go there. In addition, EveryLibrary has created a platform/service called Fight for the First, fightforthefirst.org. That's all spelled out. And this is really the platform that's kind of a turnkey to allow Americans anywhere across the country to launch a campaign, a petition, to start a group to fight back against censorship. Or if there's no hot spot, you can still start a group that just shows up to advocate in defense of the library and in support of the library and librarians. In fact, that's good firewall, and that's good inoculation against future problems. So the best time to start isn't when there's a crisis, right? The best time to start is when there isn't a crisis, and you can start showing up at school board meetings, at public library board meetings, even just calling and having meetings with your legislators to say, we are staunch library supporters. We support the First Amendment. We support the freedom to read. We support parents' rights when that means the right of every parent to have discussions with their children about reading materials, right? So you can go to Fight for the First, and this isn't just something we're going to click a button and launch a campaign and then you're just on your own. This is very high touch. So in fact, a lot of the work that I do day to day is being on calls like this, Philomena, with just average Americans who don't like what's happening in their neighborhood, and helping them to give them the skills, the tools, but also the confidence and to some extent the emotional energy and emotional support to move forward and organize and take action effectively in and on behalf of their local communities.
Yeah, it can be draining work, and we're so grateful to you, Peter, for doing it. Again, Peter Bromberg from EveryLibrary and from Let Utah Read. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Philomena. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you.
Thank you for listening to the Bookstore Education Podcast, brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!